Happy Thursday. Welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Diana to the Wolff Den. How's everything going?
Living the dream, Matt. Living the
Living,
dream.
living the dream. I say that all the time, and I'm like, I don't know whose dream it is, but it's got to be somebody's, and it's probably somebody's nightmare too. That's why we're blessed and privileged to, have the highs and the lows, and can always be better, can always be worse, right?
Yep, exactly. I'm with you all the way.
So I'm going to have you introduce yourself just real quick before we get into it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, my name's Diana. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and um, grew up in a very large family. Got recruited to play volleyball in college in Milwaukee, and moved over there for a couple years. Did a study abroad program over in Liverpool, England, and met my British husband and lived there for a few years before moving back to Arizona.
Wow, a lot of common stuff there. So we actually have friends in Liverpool that we met in on vacation, and I visited them in England. They came and hung out in London, and then they actually came to my wedding a couple years back. So became a big Liverpool fan, big LFC fan, and I love Arizona too. Big fan of Arizona. But you are 5 feet tall.
I am indeed 5 feet tall, 5 feet small, however you want to put it.
5 feet, 5 feet, yeah, 5 feet tall, 5 feet small. That's pretty good. Uh, Volleyball, how does that happen? Because man, you just think of volleyball players as, especially the women, just like giants. How did that happen?
Um, I mean, honestly, I grew up in a very low income family, so I knew for sure the only way that I was going to ever make it to college is if I paid for it myself. And so at that time, all I could think was, well, I better figure out how to get a volleyball scholarship and an academic scholarship. So originally, I actually chose basketball, but I definitely realized right away that that one, more so than any other sport, does require height. So I quickly decided that even though that was my favorite sport, I moved over to volleyball and I still played both in high school competitively. And honestly, basketball is still my favorite sport. I go play at LA Fitness and beat all the guys whenever I feel like going over there. It's pretty fun. But volleyball ended up being the route that I felt like was actually applicable. I play in the back row, so I'm a libero. The person who wears the different color jersey and specializes in the back row. So when the tall girls go up and spike it, I'm the one who dives on the ground and gets
Yeah,
the ball up in the air and rolls. So
I actually think that makes sense if you can play the back role, but someone who it's just a big advantage if you can do both
mhm.
to get on the court. I think basketball, that was the big thing. Hey, you're tall, you should be good at basketball. But man, you don't need to be good at basketball because you play guard, you play outside, and now even the big people are playing small. So it's good to be able to excel in something, and it doesn't matter if you're 5 feet tall. And I'm 6 feet something. I was good at basketball, but I don't think I was good at basketball because I was tall. And where I grew up, I just happened to be bigger than a lot of the people. But I don't think that's why. So that's probably a misconception about sports in a lot of ways. Um, you you are unapologetically me. That's your hashtag. How did that come to about?
From a younger age, I really felt like I kind of got lost in the shuffle of all of my siblings. They say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I definitely was not the squeaky wheel. So I kind of flew under the radar for my parents for a while. And I just grew up in a very, very strict, very religious household. And it was hard for me to feel like I could truly be who I wanted to be. And for a very, very long time, I really felt like I had to earn the love of my parents based upon my behavior and based upon me following certain standards that were obviously a part of their household and their beliefs. And I just feel like a lot of that kind of pent up over the years till eventually I got to this point where I was like, I just don't really want to sacrifice my authenticity anymore for safety and for security because I just didn't feel that I was able to really live the true life that I was looking to live, nor give the value that I felt like I could give to other people. So I just got to this point after college where I just said, hey, from here on out, I'm just going to be unapologetically who I am. And whoever wants to accept that, then you're my people. And whoever aren't, that's cool too. But I really feel like I got to this point where I just decided life was too short to continue to try to just play other people's games and not be who you are. So, especially after having my daughter, she's 18 months old. I had a huge reflection on figuring out I want her to be able to know that she's going to be loved and that she, regardless, just needs to be true to herself. So I went through that little bit of a self exploration journey and figured out that the only way I could do that is if I was setting that example. So that's the reason why I'm just extremely passionate about being unapologetically me. And in relation to that, you eventually find your people, and I think that's the most special part about it.
Yeah, finding your people is there's nothing better in the world than finding your people. Um, so unapologetically me, you talk about your baby. You messaged me earlier this week saying, "Hey, I got some shit going on, right? And it
Mhm.
might be hectic and all that." And I said, "Well, you're unapologetically me, right? We wouldn't want it any other way. We want it to be like, we want people to see, and you've seen this over the last year and a half, the stuff that goes on. That people are trying to work and they got to adjust, right? You're on camera and the kid walks by, the cat walks on, whatever it is, who cares? I mean, that's what your life is right now. Why would I want to, you're not going to show up here and like, all corporate wear and have the background or have everything. That's not how it is. So why would I want to have the conversation like that? And I said, it's up to you, really, not me. I don't care. It's up to you. This is who you are, and show up however you want to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really appreciate that. It's funny because a lot of us tend to put on that show of like, "Oh, we've got everything together." And I mean, literally 30 seconds before I joined this call, my daughter's having her fifth meltdown of the morning, like snot running down her face. I just put my shirt on and she comes and like rubs it all over me. And I'm just like, like, get her out of the house, please. So, yeah, it's just funny. Most of us are fighting the same fight behind closed doors, but it's just a matter of if you're willing to be open about it or if you're really just trying to put on a show. And it's okay either way, but just understand that for the people that feel like you're the only ones out there, we're all fighting the same battle over here. So,
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. It's if you're going to put on a show, and people do it all the time. That's what they do for whatever it's a defense mechanism, whatever the reason is. They want you to like them. They think that's what people want to see. That's what they think will bring success to them. But there's a lot of people who you can tell it's for show, right? You understand. I know, and they might know and not care, but we know watching this, hey, this is a show. And then there's other people who you can't tell, but they're not able to be who they are. And it's interesting that, that you mentioned that you grew up in a very religious and strict household, because I think growing up as a kid, even when I did, and being who you want to be was difficult whether you lived under strict or not religious or not. So it's hard enough as it is, regardless. And now there's struggles today in a whole different way of people wanting to, be who they want to be. But it's, there's nothing. I don't even remember who said it. Who was the one who said like, of course, on myself, I couldn't be anyone else, or it'd be too hard to be anyone else. What do you think is the difference now, in as far as just kind of being who you are and today, as opposed to the struggles that you had when you were growing up?
well, I would say the biggest like turning point for me, and I didn't really realize this all up until last year. So I knew for sure that when I had a family, I actually really wanted to be a stay at home mom. That was always on my radar. My mom never was able to do that just due to financial reasons, but that was always on my radar. So I had started a business just like fresh out of college. My last year of college, I started my first business with the intentions of like tenaciously working towards that for a good 10 years. And at that point, last year, I was able to transition permanently out of corporate due to the income that we started making through our businesses that we started. And it was so funny because I thought, I'm going to live the life now. Like, this is what I've worked so hard for 10 years for. I'm going to be so happy. And all of a sudden, I went from my corporate profession, which was slinging luxury cars. I was selling Ferraris, Rolls Royces, Lamborghinis. So I was traveling all over the nation, working 70-hour work weeks. And then all of a sudden, I hit my dream of transitioning out of corporate and staying home. And at that point, we weren't pregnant yet, didn't have a baby yet. And I was like, why am I so unhappy? And I could not figure out, like, I'm living my dream of being able to do what I want to do. And I started to figure out that for me, work was a coping mechanism to really push off all of the hardships in my life and the past traumas that I went through. And that was my solution, was just overworking all the time, because if I'm busy, I don't have time to think about if I'm happy or not or other things. And so that was a really like come to Jesus moment for me, where I was like, all right, I am very clearly not happy. And I started therapy and I started figuring out, what do I need to do to start to produce happiness in my life? Because at the end of the day, we worked so hard to get to this place where we were financially set, because that was such a large goal for me for so long. I think when you grow up with no financial stability at all, that is a huge, huge, like number one thought process in your mind is, how can I make sure that I will never have to go through those financial insecurities for my family? So at that point, I started going to therapy and trying to figure out why I wasn't happy. And ultimately, it just came back to, I wasn't being who I actually was. I was trying to be different people for different people in my life, and it was exhausting. So after a lot of therapy, after the last probably 14 months I've been in therapy, which has been fantastic, I feel better than I ever have. And I figure I have now found the meaning of what I feel like I need to do with my life and who I want to be. And that's just made all the difference for me in terms of my happiness level. And I'm so grateful that my daughter now can look at me and see what happiness actually is. And I can look at her and tell her that I'm actually happy.
Did you have to get medication?
No, so I really, really struggled with anxiety, like super bad when I was in college. So I went on medication for a while for that. I was on citalopram on a pretty low dosage. And I wouldn't say that like I would say like I'm indifferent to it. I don't really know if it helped. I don't really know if it didn't. But after a while, I went off of it, and then at this point, I feel like I've been able to really manage well just by having different coping strategies and working through different therapies and stuff. So I'm not a really big advocate either way, one way or the other, for medication. I think if people feel like it works for them, they need to do what works for them. And if people aren't and they want to work through it a different way, then I'm just not really a big proponent either
Yeah,
way.
it's interesting because I've had my struggles. For me, the medicine did and does the heavy lifting. I had some
Mhm.
therapy. I talked to people. It was good to talk to people who have no um, skin in the game for you, right? A lot of it's just more of you getting stuff off your chest, and it's like the stuff you already know. I think there's a lot of cliche that comes back to you that you already know about, but you need someone to hear it. And it might have been your friend who said the same thing, but for some reason, when it comes from the therapist, it makes sense. When it comes from your friend, what do they know?
Mhm.
We had a guest, Ryan Nurse, who went through a brain injury and depression and got out of it strictly through gratitude and some therapy, but mainly gratitude. So, as you're going through the therapy, and I think everyone should just talk to someone if they need to. Fine,
Mhm.
fine. I mean, there's no shame in it. That's what one of the things we do talk about. Same here is just getting rid of the stigma of it. Doesn't even have to have like mentally like be depressed or anything. It's whatever you're unhappy. That's a big problem. We can't go through life unhappy,
Right.
right? And we're all dealing with something. That's why we use hashtag 5 and 5. We're all dealing with something, and why go through life unhappy? So if you can figure out a way to do it and get it done, which it looks like you did fairly quickly, which is a very, very good thing. I was guilty of it. Many people wait and wait and wait and wait, and then it manifests into something different. You seem to. It sounds like you kind of, hey, I'm unhappy. It kind of hit you, in the face once you were home, and then went right into it.
Mhm. I just figured I had worked so hard for so long to get to that place in my life where I was like, this is going to be it. So I also think that's another really good teaching point is, happiness, as cliche as it is, happiness is not a destination. And I really truly felt that when I had a certain amount in my bank account, when I was debt free, when I no longer had to work for somebody else, when I had my house that I have now that is beautiful and I love it, when I cleared my car and paid for a 2022 vehicle, cleared that, like I thought I would be happy. And so it was just that really pivotal moment in my life where I was like, oh my gosh, it's not this destination that I'm going to arrive at with these check boxes. It's just going to be daily work that I'm going to have to really figure myself out. And a lot of people, I truly believe, they just don't know themselves very well. And I think therapy is like a class on yourself. And that's what I've valued so much is now the way that I think about myself. And I'm able to work through a lot of other things and ask myself, why does that make me unhappy? Or why does that irritate me? Instead of just simply being mad about something, because that doesn't really solve it. And it's going to come up time and time and time after again. So getting to that space where you can start to understand yourself and how you operate is really important.
Yeah, the big problems are not knowing who you are or not being truthful with yourself. You know who you are, but you're not admitting it or being truthful to yourself. Who cares who else you admit it to? It doesn't matter. Being true to yourself and having a good understanding of who you are. That's something I do very well. I understand my faults very, very well, and I also understand, the good stuff. And it's very helpful to really be at peace with who you are, striving to be better all the time. That's what we do, and I want to talk about some of that with you. But that's a huge part, is to really be honest with yourself. The other thing I want to comment on, I made the switch, left corporate to do this, not the Wolff Den ticket time machine, where we're keeping the printed memory alive with our animated keepsakes.
That's cool.
Um, the I've never worked harder and made less money in my life and never been happier.
Mhm.
Now, I could be much happier if I had more money, but so it's just the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But you got to figure out what makes you happy, and also is am I having a moment or am I unhappy? Right? Because we're all going to be unhappy. We're going to be mad. We're going to be sad. We're going to be even depressed. People who don't have depression are depressed. They're grieving. Whatever it is, are we having a moment? Is this a larger issue that we have to deal with? And if you are unhappy, do what you have to do to get away from being unhappy with. That's in your job, your relationship, where you're living, any of that. Almost all of it can be changed if you're truly unhappy. And if you're miserable, do it right away.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've explored a lot about mindfulness and meditation, same thing over the last 14 months. And I really got to the space where I was like, why do I feel so entitled in my life that I should never have a sad day? Like, why do I feel so entitled that I should be happy all the time? Because that's just not realistic. So that's another thing, is starting to just embrace the fact that there's going to be different emotions. There's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, but how do you find equanimity within that and really just embrace the fact that it is what it is. How do you still stay kind of level headed throughout that and know that your thoughts are not who you actually are? They're just thoughts, because we have a brain and that's what our brain is meant to do in our bodies. But just figuring out how we can still continue to stay level headed, I think, is the most important thing.
So you start selling stuff. You're traveling. You decide to leave corporate. You've had other businesses, which you can talk about if you want. But I want to talk mostly about what you're doing now.
Yeah, my number one priority, like I had said, was to be a full time mom. My daughter's 18 months old. I want to be there 100% for her, watch all her little growth stepping stones, milestones. So that's definitely my number one priority. And then, secondly, I continued to keep my businesses that I started in college, and then started a coaching program, which is what the link is on the bottom here, empower.biz, because I have seen a lot of people coach in one specific area. Like, how do you start a side hustle? How do you do drop shipping? How do you do this or that? But I would argue that the reason why most people don't succeed in scaling a side hustle or in scaling any sort of a business is typically because some sort of life event happens that knocks them off the horse. Whether it's a divorce, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's a new child comes into the family. So people's ability to manage consistency is going to be related to their environment of where they're actually in, which is why typically people who actually have a personal trainer are the ones who are going to lose weight, because they have an environment like the gym. They have an accountability buddy that they're paying for, like a personal trainer. So the reason why my husband and I started Empower.biz is because we wanted to really help people holistically. So instead of just having success in one specific area, like running an online business, we wanted to make sure, hey, how can we help people first with their personal finances? Because that'll clear up a lot of problems for a lot of people, because that's something that people sometimes just run into, to financial hardships, and then they can't run their business or they can't focus on it because they're so busy trying to make their next mortgage. So starting with personal finances and then moving into helping people start some online businesses, then doing holistic coaching and teaching people how to do stuff like this, podcasting or writing a book, making money that way, figuring out different ways to diversify. But a lot of people don't have those skill sets. So we start to teach in those areas. And it's fun because along the journey, they tend to go through this massive self development overturn where they're like, wow, I'm a different person 3 years ago than I was now. And then once people have enough cash flow, we eventually help them move into other things like owning rental properties or, the stocks and things like that. And with the long-term goal of getting to their passion project. Because again, it's so great to make sure that you're set up really, really well financially. But I would say sometimes people try to start with their passion business and they have a financial obligation to their family. And it's like, hey, we got to take care of that first so that we're not backtracking and all of a sudden dropping your passion business in the middle because you don't have the bandwidth for it or you don't have the finances for it or whatnot. So we want people to get to that space. That's ultimately where we want people to end up, is doing some sort of thing that they're passionate about, that they want to do. But again, it's like coming from a place of actually being set up and having a firm financial foundation to be able to then focus on it instead of having to drop something halfway through, like a lot of people end up doing.
Yeah, you said something earlier that, I actually had the conversation this morning. Like life doesn't care about your problems or the tragedy. It moves on.
Mhm.
And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take time to grieve or be upset. I lost my dad. I was young. People lose whatever it is, but life moves on. So, you can't get, you can't just stop. Like, I mean, I talked to my mom about this, which is a little bit contradictory. I said, but on the other hand, if you're struggling, like, stop your life for 3 months and get your stuff together, right? Because you have to be there and able to be able to function. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're going to keep, again, the problems are going to keep mounting. So it's got to be one or the other. It can't be like, going halfway through it. How do you find people are dealing with the tragedy and as you're trying to help them? And it's not always even a tragedy. It's just they're stuck. There's problems. There's not a huge difference on the impact that some of these have on your life, other than some are a little bit more severe mentally.
Right. I set the expectation ahead of time. So I actually only take on about 10 business partners a year that I'll coach, or 10 clients a year that I'll coach. And the reason why is because I do invest a lot of time actually helping them develop and learn and grow as a person and in the business world. So the first thing that we talk about extensively is, if I'm going to coach you over a 10-year process and we're going to do life together, you bet your bottom dollar something's going to happen. You will go through some sort of life tragedy in the 10 years that we're working together. So the main priorities is, how can I help you ahead of time to grow your personal bandwidth? And the way that we practice that is having expectations that things are going to be hard. So sometimes people get overwhelmed, and when they get overwhelmed is when they shut down or when they say, oh, it's going to be like this forever. So they have improper expectations, thinking that, hey, when I start my business, it's gonna be easy, and then it's not. So that's an improper expectation there, right? So I let people know ahead of time, hey, this is going to be hard for a little bit. The same way that driving a car when you were 15 and a half was terrifying, when your mom said, hit the blinker and merge onto the freeway. And you're like, no, no, 10 and 2, 10 and 2, right? So it's the same thing. Now you can drive a car with your knee and eat a bowl of cereal. It doesn't take the same bandwidth because your skill set grows. And it's the same thing with anything in life, is now you can go through a tragedy. I can go through a tragedy. My bandwidth has grown because I've learned how to have a little bit more, not necessarily emotional maturity, but a little bit more of knowing how I operate and knowing what I need to be able to get myself back on track when some sort of life event happens.
Yeah, being able to understand your capabilities mentally and physically, very important. I say, again, I had this conversation all the time. I don't argue with my body anymore. If my body tells me I need a nap, I go take a nap. I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon or if it's eight 8 o'clock at night, or whatever that case may be. My wife is an attorney, and I have to put this disclaimer that the Wolff Den and Ticket Time Machine does not recommend driving with your knees while you go cereal. Just, we have to put that out there just in case
Fair.
We're going to hear it on the news, and they're going to say, "Well, we heard it on the Wolff Den." So we got to put that disclaimer out there. You said 10 years. I mean, that's a huge commitment. Are people committing for that long? Is people have a hard time? 10 years is a lot of time to do anything. People have a hard time committing to things. How do you get people to commit to that?
Yeah, I'm not looking for people who are looking for short-term commitments. That's just the reality of how the world operates nowadays is we're so spoiled and we're just so privileged. All of the things that we have that make us a microwave society where we expect things to happen overnight. And the truth of the matter is, with anything that you are extremely good at, I guarantee you it took you at least 5 years to really build a proficient skill set in most things. Volleyball for me, 6 years, right? Most things in life, my marriage, it took me, I would say, even probably a good like 8 years before I was like, all right, I feel like I got this. Like, we're good, you know? But it just takes time. And so a business is no different. If someone's simply wanting to make quick money, that's very, very different than growing and scaling out a business that you're going to automate, that's going to eventually grow and bring in passive income. You have to build a foundation for that. But if you just want to go drive for Uber Eats or you're just wanting to sell some t-shirts and make 200 bucks a month, that's a very different process than what we coach within our coaching systems. We're looking for people who are wanting to build something long term, knowing that that is going to be a 5 to 10 year process.
And where did you? I asked this for all the coaches. Like where did you get qualified to do this, and why? What sets you apart from the others? There's a lot. I come across a lot of coaches today.
Yeah, that's what's really interesting is I and I don't want to step on toes, so I have to be like careful how I word this, but I don't necessarily think that you can go and just get like a certification and that qualifies you to teach something or to do something. So for me, it was more so I was learning from people who are incredibly financially successful. So they had already had the fruit on the tree, so to speak. They already were making a lot of money a lot of different ways. And I started to grow a relationship with them and get to know them and what their values were and how they did that. So after developing that relationship and really getting to learn directly from them for so long, you totally start to see things differently. And then after coaching so many people, you get to this point where it's like clockwork. You know what obstacles people are going to hit. You see the writing on the wall for certain people and you can be like, "Hey Matt, this is the problem that you're probably going to run into in 3 months because I can tell based on this thing that you're doing right now in our first interview." Right? Like people are very predictable, even though we would like to believe that we are all so unique. I would definitely beg to differ that most of us are actually pretty similar. So
Yeah.
in terms of like qualifications and stuff, I don't necessarily agree in terms of like a certificate or something is needed. I would say what qualifies us is the fact that we've actually helped a decent amount of people make at least a couple grand a month being able to start different businesses and grow those depending on what their actual goals are. So I would say if you're having success in actually helping people scale a business, that's something very different than just simply helping someone start a business. Anybody can help someone start a business, but whether or not it succeeds 5 years later is a really different story.
Yeah, it's we're dealing with this in Florida, where our governor is having a program to have veterans become teachers by having like half the qualifications of what all these other teachers have had to gone through to get their um, job, and which doesn't pay a whole lot, by the way. The teachers, it's a whole big thing. I bring that up, because it's parallel to that, but also uh, you talk about making an impact on people outside. But unapologetically, me is certainly some of it. What else has driven you to want to help people be better and help yourself be better?
I really feel like I just did not have the guidance that I wish I would have had at a younger age. I didn't have a person to talk to. I studied sport management at first because that's what every other athlete was studying in college. So I was like, "What are you studying?" They're like, "Sport management." I was like, "I guess that's what I'll study." Until I met a very impactful professor and she said, "I want every single one of you to go and talk to somebody who is in your profession, who's 20 years ahead of you. And I want you to talk to at least 5 people, preferably 10. And you come back and you tell me what you learned and if you still feel like this is the right route for you." I went and interviewed 10 people, 8 of them being female. I came back and I changed my major.
Hmm.
We don't really look at the long term. We don't really look at the ladder before we actually get on the ladder. We're like, oh, that's a pretty ladder. So then we jump on it, not really looking where the ladder's going to end up. And so after talking to so many of those women, they were like, hey, if you're cool with your partner raising your kids, like you're not going to see your kids because every single event is in the evenings,
Yeah,
so we didn't want to do.
we had John O'Leary, who's I'm actually putting some clips together of his conversation, and he mentioned the ladders. Like people are getting up on the wrong ladders, right?
Mhm.
You spend all this time trying to get to the top of the ladder, but the ladder is in the wrong place or it's the wrong ladder. So
Totally.
that's a great nugget there.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't remember what the original question was, but I was going somewhere with mindset. Like
but the
mindset.
impact, like you want to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Something.
because if I can teach them how to think, that changes their life. Because I might not be in their life forever, but we're naturally programmed to think the way that society has programmed us because that's how we grew up. We grew up in the school systems. We grew up, most of us, our parents being employees. So we're programmed to think a very specific way. So my goal is simply, can I challenge people's mindset? And if I can teach them how to think differently, then hopefully that will eventually lead to a different result in many, many areas of their life. So that's the main thing. If we can have a mindset shift, people can think about things differently, and that impacts every area.
What does the program look? We talk about long term, but what does a program look like? Is there different levels, and is it all like, hey, I have to commit to this right now? I mean, this stuff happens, right? You could be with someone and they can get pregnant, or
Yep.
they can have to move, and it changes the whole trajectory of whatever you guys would be working on. So how do you guys work with the people that you do?
Yeah. So we're not naive in the sense that we know there's always going to be turnover no matter what you do. It just doesn't matter because sometimes people are going to pivot when they recognize one or two things. They're either going to recognize that they don't feel like they personally will ever develop a high enough skill set or a high enough commitment level or whatever it might be to actually have success in scaling some businesses outside of their career, or they get to a space where they really get to a space where they decide that that's no longer their goal or their dream, and that is completely fine too. So there's a really big stigma out there of quitters, right? Oh, you can't quit things. And I would say it's important to pivot if you understand and know that that no longer is the direction that you're wanting to go. That is okay. So on a coaching perspective, I understand and respect knowing that sometimes people are going to pivot, and if they feel like that's the best option for them, then that's okay too, right? But it's more about how can at the moment I have this long-term expectation and feel like we are on the same page, very much on the same page. Because I'll chat with people for a couple of months before we decide to move forward in doing a partnership. So it's more about at that time, do we feel like we have the same long-term goals? And if we do, and I really like that person and they like me, then why not have a partnership and why not go for it? Because I'm not going to coach somebody I don't enjoy spending time with. So regardless, it ends up being a really valuable relationship in my life. And I've had people pivot out where they no longer really want to do something on the side of their career, or they've found a different path. But I'm still great friends because those relationships that are built as an adult, you realize you have fewer and fewer real relationships that truly do add value in your life. So that's kind of an intangible at the end of the day. It's not financial, but it's an intangible that I have found that's added a lot of value regardless.
Yeah, they're definitely got to find the people who in your network that you can trust, or that are really, we talked about really your people.
Hmm.
Um, you met your husband. He's from Liverpool in England. Uh,
Hmm.
way different. I hang out and talk to my friends. And how long did it take you to adjust to someone and maybe him to you? Right? I wonder which is more of an adjustment. I have to feel like it's tougher to adjust to the way they are and talk than the other way around, just because they probably hear a lot of English with the tourists. But I don't know. What was your experience like?
Yeah. So it's funny because people assume that because England speaks English that we're very similar countries, and that just could not be more untrue. That could not be more inaccurate. Okay. I would say the only similarity is that both countries speak English. So American TV, we don't really think about this, but nationwide, there actually aren't that many accents, especially for how large the United States of America is. There's very few accents. Whereas in England, you legitimately go every 30 miles and they have a very distinctly different accent. So you don't even have to ask where people are from. You're just like, oh, this person's from Liverpool, this person's from London, this person's from Coventry. You just know because based on the way that they speak.
And they all
And
hate each other.
yeah, they're very
They're all the worst.
proud for
These
their
people are
own
the worst.
individual
That's
places.
probably a better way to put it. They're proud of who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I would say that the reason why it's harder typically for Americans to understand people from England is because the only thing that we ever hear on TV is typically a Cockney accent, which is London.
Yeah.
Then when people are coming from different places like Newcastle or Liverpool, there's just such distinctly different accents that are actually very hard for us to understand because we don't hear them on TV.
And the words, like when I worked for LexisNexis, or the CEO of the whole entire thing was English. And, he would always say, hey, in England, we use this word, and, it kind of translates to this. The funny thing that I get with my friend and the people that we've talked to, even some of the comedians, is the use of the C word is just like, hey, dude, what's up?
Yep.
It's crazy, right? But there's words that we use that, someone said prick, I think. If you call someone a prick there, that you might as well have called them the C word there. And
Uh-huh.
for here, if someone said that, you'd be like, all right, it's just another
Yeah.
Saturday in the city.
Very different. Very, very different. And I think that's actually also a really interesting thing. Going back to the previous question that you asked about, like, how do we help people? Like, what do we actually do for our coaching programs? It's a lot as a coach, having success as a coach. It's a lot about recognizing that because people operate so differently, a lot of it could be cultural. Some of it could be simply the way that those people were raised in one specific area, or it could be based on economic class. There's a lot of different factors of why people are very different. And you have to be able as a coach to identify that and say, so for our coaching program, what we typically do is we start off with people's personal finances, then we help them start an online business, then we help move into podcasting and authoring, things like that. Then we move into real estate and traditional investments, and then their passion projects, whatever it is that they want to do. Now, with some people, based on background, based on culture, personal finances starting at number one person could be they could be like, let me pull up my spreadsheet and show you to the dollar what I spend. Whereas other people are like, oh, I'm supposed to budget my money. So that as a coach is what you have to be able to navigate and pivot and figure out, are you giving people too much information? Are you giving people not enough information? Are they getting overwhelmed and they feel like they could never be successful because you're at this level right now and they're just not quite there and you're not meeting them where they're at? So that's a really big part of coaching that I think is super important.
Did you see the movie Dodgeball when Vince Vaughn was sharing his receipts? And like, I think I got him here somewhere. I won't show you the stuff I have here. I do have a spreadsheet. I have QuickBooks, but I also have chaos in some ways. But it's important. Because I'm a very organized person in a lot of ways. But now I have to figure out what's more important to be organized about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough thing to figure out. And it's not even just organized, just how do I prioritize? People are not very good about prioritizing. Time is the biggest thing they're not good at prioritizing, and time is the most valuable thing we have. And being able to work smarter and use your time better, it's money, but it's also you get more experiences. You get to spend more time with the people and everyone has enough time for everything. I truly believe that everyone has enough time with everything. I used to say, used to be like, it's not like you're the president of the United States, right? And then now the president of the United States is playing golf 4 days a week. So obviously he's got enough time to run the country and play golf. So we all have enough time. How do we prioritize? Which is a lot of things like, I can't do it is more like, I don't want to do it, right? I'm not going to prioritize this. But again, that's more about being honest with, yourself. And maybe it couldn't hurt to be honest with the people who you're just like, look, it's tough to hear, but it's like, I have this amount of space and I only have time for these sort of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of it is about setting up systems in our lives. The most impactful book that I've read so far in terms of creating habits is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Unbelievable book. I read a lot of books. That one is extremely helpful for practical information. for implementing new habits. And again, a lot of times, the majority of our lives, we are motivated by fear. If we do not show up to work, we get fired. If we are late too many times, we get let go, like whatever it might be. Most of the time, we are motivated by fear. But then when you move into something else, like losing weight or starting a business, you're not motivated by fear unless it gets to an extreme, right? Most of the time, you're specifically motivated by, you have to go by motivation and not by fear. So it becomes very difficult for people to make that mental connection. So we don't rise to the level of our motivation. Most of the time, we're going to fall to the level of our habits. And the systems that we put in place is going to dictate what habits we actually have. So I would say the top most important things for people is, how do we take a habit that we want to establish and tie some sort of emotion to it? So I would say, for example, somebody who's having a side business and they're having trouble getting motivated to put in some time every week, you're not just choosing not to build your business. What you actually emotionally have to connect that to is, I am choosing to not have the vacation home that we want in Hawaii, or whatever it might be. I don't care what it is for you. I am choosing not to have a college fund for my oldest child, James, right now, right? Like whatever it is, put some sort of emotional attachment to the thing that you aren't doing and talk about it and let yourself know that, because it creates a sense of urgency, which is what most people lack, is that sense of urgency. And then that system of having the same time every day, or the same type of system that you can put in place where you can actually accomplish those. I would
I
say
think
that.
that part of the issue is, you're talking about these are bad habits, right? Can we change our bad habits? Some things, yes. There's things that you do, if it's weight loss, these are lifestyle changes that need to basically be almost for the rest of your life for the average person, because they don't have the ability to do moderation and and that's a very tough thing to do, to have a whole lifestyle change when you're used to a certain thing and you enjoy a certain thing. So that's probably what I think the biggest obstacle is for the people who want to make these changes. I know that is for me. I mean, I've
Mhm.
been on diets and I can eat healthy for a week, 2 weeks, and maybe even a month, and then something's going to happen, right? And I can't do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So you have to find an
Right.
alternative way, and
Mhm.
not everyone learns the same way. There's different ways, and you have to, as a teacher, as a coach, you have to be able to adjust that. As a therapist, as any of these things, as a salesperson, I mean, people their behavior and the way they absorb things is very different.
Right.
That's a very good skill to be able to adapt and not just have this, hey, this is the way it needs to be taught.
Right. And again, it goes back to knowing yourself. I know with 100% certainty, if I walk down the chip and cookie aisle, I am buying Oreos. I know it I know myself now at this point. So if I don't want to buy the Oreos, I literally will go out of my way to walk around the chip and cookie aisle, like 2 aisles over, so
I
that I
mean,
don't.
you're a tiny little thing. You could have the Oreos. Have you had? I
And I
shouldn't
work
probably,
on it
I
every
shouldn't be able,
single
I shouldn't be
day.
saying that, but the two questions I have, and they might be the most important questions of the whole show here. Um, have you made your own Oreos yet, and have you tried the birthday cake Oreos?
Okay, this is gonna be extremely disappointing. So I actually have celiac, so I cannot eat
You can eat
gluten.
the Oreos.
I can only eat the gluten-free Oreos, and they only make the gluten-free normal
Yeah,
ones right now. I'm hoping maybe they'll branch out eventually, but that's why I like the Oreos so much, is because there's not many
my
goodies that I can't have.
my wife is gluten intolerant, so she doesn't eat gluten, and but it won't kill her. It won't. She'll feel bad and get some bumps, but
Mhm.
it can be cross. There could be fries
Cross-contaminate.
cooked, whatever. It's not a big deal. And I thought that would be. I'm such a foodie. I thought that would be such a big obstacle. But it's really not, especially these days. I mean, we eat gluten free mac and cheese. You couldn't even tell the difference.
Mhm. Yeah, 10 years ago when I got diagnosed, you could. People are like, "Gluten, what is that?" I'm like, "I don't know, I'm just learning to."
I'm still learning. I'm just like, I bought this thing, and she's like, I can't eat that. I'm like, why not? I don't know. It's like soy and soy sauce, and
Yep.
it's
All
complicated.
the things, yeah.
It's
But again,
com-
I don't even crave gluten anymore because it's just a lifestyle change. And same thing with the gym. I didn't work out for 2 years, the year that I was pregnant and the year after I had my daughter, and eventually I started going to the gym every morning at 5:30 because I paid a lot of money for a gym membership, a stupid amount, and every single time that I would miss, they would charge me $15. And that was like what I needed to hold myself accountable to get in the habit. And now that I'm finally in the habit and have been doing that for 5 months, it's become more of a lifestyle change where I'm awake at 5:30 every morning, regardless of if it's a day I'm going to the gym or not, you know? So we can change, but sometimes temporarily we just have to have hard things in place that we might not want to have to get us to change to then like keep that going long term and that it will get easier. That's the most important thing. It will get easier when it becomes a lifestyle habit.
Yeah, certain things. It's actually like I am so addicted to chips and all this, but I can go forever without eating a cookie. If
Mhm.
it's there, I'll eat it, but I don't. I don't buy cookies or it's just one of those soda too. For me, it's like it's just weird. Some of the things that I can stay away from that I would love. I mean, who doesn't like to have this stuff? But I could do without them forever. It's just weird what some people can be. Um, what they can avoid and what they can't. It's stuff you can be like, I don't care. Cake, ice cream, um, but it's amazing how some people, and it's a problem. Some people literally cannot control themselves. I have trouble controlling myself, and
Mhm.
it's a difficult thing. Those are hard habits. I think my mom went to like a hypnotist with her and the people that she grew up with, friends with, and made them like quit smoking and stuff like that. It's amazing the types of solutions to some of the problems that we have.
Yeah. Well, changing your environment too. It's for me, my husband eats extremely healthy. His background's in nutrition. So he eats extremely healthy. And we just try not to keep the stuff in our house because if it's not in our house, I'm significantly less likely to actually eat any of it. Or if I want to, I very much have to go out of my way to drive all the way to the store, go get that one specific thing. And then it becomes a very conscious effort that I'm doing it. And so the half of the time I can talk myself out of it.
Yeah. I want to go back to unapologetically me. Um, do you see a lot of backlash for like kind of being who you are, and how has that changed as when you first kind of started? Because
Yeah.
some people don't like it. I say,
Mhm.
some people want honesty, and that's really what it is. But sometimes, we don't need to hear the full honest. So you can see how some people will be like, "Nah, it's not for me."
Yeah, I would say that I grew up in a very diverse, I don't know. I just grew up in a very diverse everything, like culturally, ethnically. I grew up in a very diverse life. So I'm extremely respectful about what I post. So I think that anybody can be unapologetically them and have an opinion on anything. But the difference between people who get backlash and people who don't is if you're doing things respectfully.
Yeah.
So I just make sure that all of my posts are always respectful of people. Do I have opinions on certain things that I don't post on LinkedIn, whether it be politically or religiously? Yes, because I don't necessarily see the value in posting that when I'm not going to change anybody's mind and nobody's going to change my mind. So it's like, what's the point of talking about it?
Yeah, I think that's sort of a problem. I think we need to talk about this stuff, but we need to find a way to talk about it civilly, which has become a big problem. I
Mhm.
would say we can't even talk civilly amongst the people who agree and think the
Right.
same things. But we need to have these conversations more and call out the bad, uh, bad behavior. And certain things are bad and good. There's no gray area in certain things. I think, um, you just can't. There's no arguing it. But
Yeah, well, and I also think personally for me, I don't see a need to bring up something political when, in my experience, I am not the most experienced person in the room for that. So if there's thousands of other people on LinkedIn that really are, I have no problem supporting a comment or giving a thumbs up or being like, wow, that was a really great way that that person wrote that. But I also am very much okay with being unapologetic about the fact that I am not an expert on many, many things. So I like to share my advice and my experience within my life and hoping that that will add value to different people with where they're at in their life or the people who can relate. But I love LinkedIn because there's so many experts on different topics, and I don't feel the need to be the advocate for every single thing that I believe.
yeah, there's a lot of experts who aren't really experts too. But well, that's for
Yeah, that's fair.
another conversation. Who self-proclaimed experts. I
Hmm.
want the person whose other people are saying are experts, and not just because they have this community of people who they've I don't want to say brainwashed, but they've conditioned to say, "Hey, this guy must know what he's talking about."
I think time will tell. if you follow somebody long term and then maybe you get to have a couple conversations with them, it's pretty easy to see like who's just blowing steam versus building a character of themselves.
I think it is, but people have built such big followings that it doesn't matter anymore. That the people like to be part of that group, and that's
Hmm.
part of the thing about, even if you agree, this whole crowd is going to just like jump on you. Um, what can people do to take this first steps to become unapologetically me? Like someone realize, hey, I need to be myself. What would you recommend? Baby steps, not like, hey, jump into the deep end, but what
Yeah.
would be the first step?
Truly actually identifying what is important to you. What are your values? That sounds so simple, but you'd be surprised when you sit down to write those down, how many you naturally start to write and be like, "Oh crap, is that my parents' views? Is that my sister's views who's
Yeah,
very outgoing or very loud spoken, or is that my view?" Right? So sitting down and writing those things down, and I have it literally on my fridge right here. My top 3 values is adventure, authenticity, and balance. Like
are
those.
those values? I mean, those. So that's the other thing. Like people have to know, understand what is a value. It doesn't have to. These are things that are important to me.
Yep. Well, and then breaking that down a little bit more. So, adventure. What does adventure mean to me? Well, I want to have an adventurous life. So I feel like maybe like a little bit spontaneous or do something. What would check the box for me? And for me, that's vacations. I really like to go and explore other places. So I make it a priority that we go to at least one international country a year.
That's
Right.
a
That's something
plan.
that's on my list. So I've been to 17 countries now. That's helping me live according to my value, and that makes me happy. So
Yeah.
figuring out what your values are, what's important to you, and then what items that are realistic for you to be able to do to live in accordance of those.
And I know we're running out of time. What's the one country you haven't been to that would be you can go next month? Where is it?
I think Japan. I've
Japan.
always wanted to go to Asia somewhere, but
Yeah,
yeah.
we went. I went to Japan with my brother on a trip he won. Fantastic, loved it. Went to China on our own, loved it. Much different experience, but I recommend getting over to Asia if you can. It was really cool. I regret not eating the insects at the market. So if you do get to Asia, and I was in China, eat the insects. Don't chicken out. I was very surprised. My brother, who's extremely adventurous, chickened out on that, and that's probably why I didn't, because he didn't. He's my twin. Um, we'll we'll let you out of the Wolff Den with the same question we let everyone out with. You can spend a day with anyone in the world. They have to be alive. You can't be related to them. Who are you choosing, and what would you guys do?
Yeah, a woman named Dr. Jen Welter. I don't think she knows what an impact she's made on my life, but she was the first female NFL coach ever. And if you're playing Madden, things like that, you can actually choose her now as a coach on there, which is pretty cool. But this one picture comes up every time that I'm going to print off and have my little daughter's face in there. But it's her, Jen Welter, with a pink dress on, and the little girl's got a pink dress on, but they're both holding a football helmet and a football, and they've got cleats on. And she really just talks a lot about not putting yourself in boxes. So just because you're a girl doesn't mean you can't play football. And just because you like to be a girly girl or wear pink doesn't also mean that you can't wear pink because you like football. So I just really love the boundaries that she's stretched of what people can choose to be, and they don't have to fit in one box.
She was one of the early guests on the Wolf Den, so you can go back
No.
to the archives. By the way, I'm unapologetically me, but I will apologize for the poor quality of my podcasting back when she was on. We're at 223. She was probably in the top 50, first 50 episodes. So check that out
I
and
will. That's
some of
amazing.
what she had to say. Unapologetically me. Follow, connect on LinkedIn, and it's Empower. IMPOWR.biz. If you want to start to make some changes to your life, Diana is a good place to start. So check that out. Really appreciate the time. Great conversation, and I look forward to. I'm going to be out in Arizona for the Super Bowl. We'll have to play some hoops out there and maybe watch a Liverpool soccer match.
My husband will be very excited about that.
All right. Good luck,
Cool. Yeah,
and
I
we'll
appreciate
see everybody next week. Have a great weekend. Stay
it. Take care.
safe. Have fun. Do something good.